ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another podcast episode. We are sponsored by Waterloo on this lovely episode, so please head over to Whole Foods. Feel free to buy any 12-pack of Waterloo. It is only $3.49. I'm kidding, guys. You start that one.
We are not sponsored by Waterloo. If there's any brand infringement, I just want to let you know that this is a disclaimer. This is Ankur Garg, individually speaking.
Mr. Bezos, if you're listening, we would happily take your money.
The CPA, the lawyer, and the market.
I think we nailed that. And we have our first case study.
The trailer.
Oh.
Okay. Hey guys, how's everyone back at home? We're back for another episode of the Billable Hour Podcast. To my left, we have the CPA.
Zach Gordon. Hello, everybody.
To my right, we have the one, the only.
Gigio K Ninan, the lawyer.
That was very, very descriptive.
Yep.
Really in depth. Impressive, actually.
You know, a lot of people forget the period after my my middle initial.
How many people forget that?
Probably one. And I remember it.
Those are things that just hit home, you know?
Is this how an attorney increases his billable hours?
Oh, by speaking very slowly.
And adding characters into
course.
documents that don't need to be there?
Because not only does he bill by the hour, he bills by the letter and by the punctuation. Little known fact.
No. As you know, it's value-based billing, all right? Value-based billing.
All right. So I'm the business owner on the podcast. You guys are also business owners, but I'm the one where my background is only business. I want some advice that I should have received when I was starting my business. What do you guys have for new business owners?
Well, first and foremost, what do you want to do? What is your business? And there's one question that, believe it or not, a lot of prospective entrepreneurs don't ask. How do I make money? Is this a hobby or is this an actual business? And you'll notice on shows like Shark Tank, they ask that question all the time. You know, does this make money? And they sometimes play it off in jest or it's meant for dramatic effect. But that's actually the number one question you should ask. So before you start thinking about entity, before you start thinking about partners, any of the more formal things that, you know, we'll talk about in a second, am I going to make any money on this?
For me, I don't get to that question because I don't give financial advice. I leave that to you. What I do, on the other hand, is I start from the period of entity formation. So what type of entity do you want to create? How do you hire your employees and everything after that? And how to protect yourself in terms of risk management, insurances. What type of insurances should you get? How do you stay compliant with the state of
IP.
New York or New Jersey? How do you protect your brand? IP protection. All of those things are the things that I think about as a lawyer, but I don't get to the financial aspect. Although, in doing all those other things, you are helping build some financial security.
So now that you told us what you do, what's your advice?
Get a good lawyer. Get a good accountant.
Okay.
Joking aside, that's actually very good advice.
It's true.
Professional services, believe it or not, are forgotten for the most part, especially at the foundational step of starting your business.
What do you think new business owners spend money on first?
LegalZoom.
LegalZoom is the best thing for lawyers and accountants because you're guaranteed to get 10% of the picture maybe, and then we have to come in and clean it up.
Yeah, it happens for me all the time. Someone's like, oh, you know, I want to go cheap with this. I want to start a business on LegalZoom, Ankur Garg. And then, you know, and then they hire a lawyer and they're like, oh, hey, what haven't you done? You know, setting up the corporate formalities, the resolutions, the ledgers, especially if you're you know, transferring assets later, you know, getting investors, all those things people are not thinking about at the outset. No. And so what ends up happening is that they get this like templated thing and they don't have anybody to talk to and they mess up. That's really what happens.
And then they register or not in the state to do business, or they register in the wrong state, or they leave some really material things out. And then all of a sudden you mention investors, you look to bring someone in, or you look to sell the business or expand or whatever the case, and we got a problem. XYZ is missing, or they didn't think about 1, 2, 3, and then here we are. I'll actually give you a great example. So I work with an accelerator group, and there's all these brilliant people, and they have all these ideas, and I'll obviously not mentioning names here or anything, but not to not get myself in trouble. No, but really, really smart people working on this. Actually, it's a SaaS platform, and they never properly set up the right entity, nor did they have an operating agreement. And they're making money, which is a problem, because who gets what? Who gets, when they ask about distributions and how do you handle it? And they're like, oh, well, what does the agreement say? What agreement? That's a problem.
Uh-oh.
And, I think, before we get to that point in starting a business, although I think it is very important, what clients or potential, new entrepreneurs do is that they're not thinking about the worst case scenario. They're not thinking about the future. What they do is they're thinking about the beginning. They're thinking about the marriage stage is what the honeymoon stage.
There
the honeymoon stage where
don't worry, sweet. He meant marriage. The marriage phase is what he was trying to say.
It's definitely the marriage.
Marriage
phase.
is bliss.
It's okay, Saranya. I got you. Honeymoon phase.
It is definitely the marriage. Sweet. It is definitely the marriage phase. Because it's it's everybody's happy. All right. Happy wife, happy life. Anyway, so no, but
the two married men jumped on that real quick.
Oh, we know better.
Okay.
100%. So that being said, when you're first getting married, everyone's happy. Everything's great. No one's thinking about the prenuptial agreement. No one's thinking about all of the things that you need to do to protect yourself.
We interrupt this podcast to ask a very important question.
I don't do divorces.
Are we pro prenup?
Oh, 100%. Yes. For me, I don't have one, but yes.
Zach, are you pro prenup?
If we're talking in the pure business sense, of course.
I am. So I was that guy as an early entrepreneur in a marriage that doesn't think about a prenup. But no, if I had to advise anyone, yes, a prenuptial agreement is very important. But we're not talking about divorces here. We're not talking about marriage. That was, again, just an analogy. So we're all on the same page.
And dig that hole.
Just so we're on the same page. But in seriousness, when we're starting a business, it's very similar. What ends up happening is folks get into a business with their friend, their loved ones, siblings, and I see that all the time. I actually had two clients that were brothers that fought on shareholder disputes, and don't get me wrong, that happens all the time.
To be frank, sometimes family are the worst business partners you could have.
Yep, it happens all the time. And everyone, because you're family, because you have those external factors, they're like, oh, we don't need an agreement, we don't need this, we're just going to get into it. And so I think we just have to take a step back and think about, hey, what do we need to start a company? First, we need that entity formation, right? So setting up the business, and that's where an accountant is helpful too. Like, what's the difference between an LLC? This is a question I get all the time. What's the difference between an LLC and an S corp? And it's obviously an S corp is not a corporate formality; it's a tax election, right? And that's where a accountant comes into play. And so starting that, and then getting into like the formalities of the actual incorporation, getting your federal tax ID number, getting set up. But once you're done setting up your bank account and everything else, how do we protect each other? And what is the scope? In the last episode, we talked about the scope and the engagement, right? Now we're talking about what is the scope of this entity? How are you getting paid?
What's the mission?
What's ultimately the mission? How are you getting paid? Who's filing taxes? Who's the point person for the state?
Well, we'll just back up a second. Just the fact that you do have to file taxes. So the second you hit go, the clock starts.
Whoa. We have to file taxes now?
It's a weird concept, I know, but the government wants their cut.
Okay, so
pay Uncle Sam.
So Zach, explain this to me. You've probably seen businesses start and close up.
Oh, yeah.
More than the two of us. What's the number one reason you think businesses shut down?
Not adapting their business model to reality. So I'll give you, again, keeping a name out of it, but very large organization, not understanding over decades of time that, retail.
Blockbuster? That's what we're talking about?
Pretty close.
Okay.
But not understanding the realities of a current market. So adapting to online consumers, adapting to new product offerings and new ways to offer products. So, thinking about, and that can translate to any industry, frankly.
Including accountants and lawyers.
Of course. We have to we're mandated to keep learning through CB, CLE, just to make sure that we're always up on our game. So, to keep our licenses, we're mandated to keep learning, keep adapting all the time. And that's not always the case.
Just on that point, just before we get to the number one reason, that CLE, CPE, that's all on an individual basis, right? How are we as entrepreneurs as an accounting practice or lawyers, how are we going to compete in the future? And that's one of the things that I always think about, because with AI, contracts on AI or financial accounting systems on AI, how are we going to do it, to be quite frank? Because we're currently a service-based industry, right?
Right.
And it is getting ultra competitive. Okay.
Well, and I would agree that we're not just service related. I mean, between different agreements, between financial models, even a tax return or financial statement is a commodity at the end of the day. And those commodities are becoming cheaper by the second.
My accountant and my lawyer or my therapist?
Honestly, you might be saying that slightly in jest, but that's 100% true.
I'm being totally honest.
Oh, yeah.
You will not believe what my business partner did as I walked into the accountant's office. No, I think business owners will go to an accountant or go to a law firm, and they're going to go ask for advice on business.
Right.
And I think service providers immediately jump to, this is the most common problem and this is how you solve it. But they're not actually putting themselves in the owner's shoes, right? The question you asked, why are you doing this business?
Right.
What are you actually planning on doing? Why is this important to you? Has anyone else been in your shoes trying to do this exact same thing and made it? Has anyone been in your shoes and not made it?
Well, who are your competitors? How do you compare to them? What do you know about them? Yeah. I mean, those are fundamental things that
industry knowledge.
Right.
I coach a handful of entrepreneurs right now, and you guys called it, like, you hit the nail on the head, right? There's people that just won't listen to the advice that either one of you guys want to give.
Oh, for sure.
I sure as hell didn't listen to anything anyone told me when I was on my skyrocket spaceship startup, right? I think at the end of the day,
do you listen to them now?
Yeah, 100%.
But that was a tough lesson to learn, I'm sure.
Oh, definitely. But more importantly, I think now I understand the importance of looking at what everyone before me has done to not repeat those mistakes.
Right.
Now I read books on a regular basis, and most of the people that I'm coaching, I literally hand them 10 books to read before we start coaching, and in exchange, the first hour is free.
Interesting.
Right?
Interesting.
I charge $2,500 an hour. So for a free hour, they're going to read the 10 books.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no question about it. And then after they read the 10 books, they actually come to me with all of these questions like, why did this happen at this company? And why did this happen there? And then they start realizing, like, oh, wow, maybe I should have listened to the attorneys and maybe I should do this.
Right.
But
Correct.
then I find out that most business owners don't understand the difference of planning a full 3-year business plan.
Oh, man.
Yeah, they
right?
definitely.
And what's really interesting, especially those that are going to raise money, they'll start thinking 5-7 years out, but not have any focus at all on those first 1, 2, 3 years.
Absolutely.
And
there's milestones that you have to hit.
Of
Like
course,
revenue
yeah.
milestones
Right.
that will make a huge difference as to whether or not you need this much protection or this much protection. And for those of you guys listening with audio only, my hands are going for a large amount of protection or a little amount of protection. Gigio, you always want the full protection, right? Black and white.
Yes.
Everything needs to be written on paper, but sometimes business owners just can't have that.
Well, not necessarily. Not 100%. Not like as a lawyer, what all I can do is I can give them expectations and say, hey, listen, this is how you protect yourself. This is how much insurance you need. But I don't say, hey, this is the only way, because at the same time, there is a dollar number that goes with this, right? And they may not have the money to do it. So maybe offering a little bit less protection, getting them, some risk protection, not the whole.
But at minimum,
risk
making
protection.
sure they're speaking to the right insurance professional so that they
Correct.
understand what that coverage means.
Well, Zach, where do you draw the line ethically in giving advice to a client? Because obviously there's a gray area. Like, for example,
Right.
if you need business insurance, you don't necessarily need it that day, right? And
Right.
let's say there's a certain amount of year, there's 12 months of payments, there's a certain perfect time to sign up for it, right? Like
Right.
right before you actually need it.
Of course.
Versus having it preemptively for 5 years and throwing away money and so on and so
Right.
forth. But where do you draw the line on providing any type of advice?
It's a case-by-case basis, honestly. And honestly, it's industry by industry. So let's just say, we're talking SaaS before. So you're building that SaaS platform, let's just say. So the clock doesn't really start technically until you're able to generate revenue. So you're at that pre-revenue stage, the answer is a little bit different than when it's viable for you to start bringing that sort of revenue in. So it really depends. And industry by industry, it's very different. Even personality by personality, it's different, honestly. And just
the risk averse versus the not risk averse.
Of course. I mean, you have plenty of cowboys out there, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But at the same time, to your point, you have some people that just not interested in taking any risk whatsoever.
How about you? What's your ruling on ethics in terms of advice that you give?
Well, as a lawyer, you have to be 100% ethical because the professional rules of responsibility govern us. That being said, I'm video recorded. This is
a whole different voice.
He went into full lawyer mode there.
This is 100%. But with respect to ethics, what I do is I stay within the ethical. See, there's a difference between ethical boundaries and then giving and the standards of what a business owner should do. So ethically, you set forth the scope, the service, the fee. You get it in writing. You always tell them in terms of emails, confirm everything. Those are the like the nuts and bolts of how to do it.
They have the understanding. So so just to be clear, they have to have the understanding that this is
communication
by the book, how it should be done, and obviously you want that all in writing just to
communication.
CYA.
Yes,
but end of the day, it's on them to, I think, circling back to the original point, whether they're going to listen to the advice or not.
Yeah.
So here's my curveball. I think you need a board of advisors before you need the rest of these roles.
The board is so important, no question.
You mean some advisors on the side, to the CEO or to the company?
So obviously, someone who's just starting off needs a mentor type person to give them advice, right? But if you start formalizing things, I think you need a board. Because the board's one job role, in my opinion, is to essentially police.
To protect them from themselves.
Right, to protect them from themselves. And, if you hit a revenue point and they didn't jump in for insurance or they didn't jump in for something else, the board can, what's going on with you guys?
Well, ultimately, a board of directors has a fiduciary duty to protect that company from itself.
But the reality is that it's not going to happen. So in a closely held company like an LLC, any business owner, and you know this, you're a person who, say you started a business, you want control. As a business owner, you want utmost control.
Well, a board member doesn't have control.
Well, and it doesn't even necessarily have
but
to
you don't want somebody else breathing down your but
it doesn't have to be as formal as a board. It can just be someone you trust.
But let me give you a great example. Okay, so when I was starting off, the critical point for me was at $5 million in revenue.
Okay.
Up until $5 million in revenue, I knew who to go get advice from. I knew collegiate professors. I had great attorneys. I had great accountants. And they've all seen and dealt with people up until that range.
Right.
Correct.
5 to 10, 10 to 50, 50 beyond, I had no one to talk to.
It's a whole different conversation.
There were no books to read. There was no firm for me to graduate to from the firm I was at before because I just ended up swallowing my attorneys and my CPAs to come join me.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, sure, there was a couple other big places that I could go, but the advice I was being given was so black and white, where no one helped me protect myself from myself,
right,
and the decisions that I'm making, and it was painful, right? There were no places to go to get advice on any of those topics.
Well, I think you bring up a great point, and it's actually something my grandfather said years and years ago when I first became an entrepreneur. He's like, everyone prepares to fail. No one ever prepares to succeed. And I thought that was really sagely advice, and it's something that obviously I still think about all the time. And to your point, scaling the business, making sure that there's, it's a dirty word, but controls in place. So you can't, as an owner, just go completely cowboy and do what you want, making sure that there's someone over your shoulder. And I mean that in the best possible way. So that budgets aren't out of control, that there's a 6-month reserve in the bank just in case for that rainy day, or you have, an advisory board or whatever those different things look like depending on the industry.
Well, first of all, let me just circle back. So first of all, it depends on the type of business you're running, right? So if you're an LLC, right, you're going to be either member managed or manager managed business, right? So you don't have like that necessary board. You can create a board of advisors.
Well, I think the board was just an example. Let me
finish. And so in terms of like a board of directors, in terms of an Inc., you might have one of those things, a fiduciary duty. You might have shareholders, all those things. What all I'm saying is that there are going to be folks, and it's all going to come down to your own personality. as an owner, right?
Right.
For example, if Ankur felt that he was not able to manage his own expectations or how to like fight against himself in terms of like doing those things, right? And that's an issue a lot of owners may have. That's separate than having a company set up with the proper formalities, right?
Right.
And so all I'm saying is that more times than not, I don't think people are going to go out and get board of advisors, even though I do agree that it is beneficial. And from a business owner's perspective, I do agree that it is beneficial. I'm not saying that it's going to happen because sometimes they require equity, money, some kind of like vesting schedule. And it's not things that these folks that are newcomers want to give up at the outset.
I don't know, man. I just disagree. I mean, look at us, right? We're in a fraternity. And I just had a national convention where I attended, and there's entrepreneurs that I met.
Yep.
And they have access to a guy like me that'll sit on their board for a price that makes sense. And I'll make sure they never make a mistake that I made. And all they have to do is have one conversation with me, and they're bought in. So I don't think it's impossible to convince business owners to get someone to protect themselves.
It really is personality based. Just finding someone who can speak at your level for whatever that means.
I think ultimately, yeah, it does depend on the person and depends on the company. But there are different ways of getting to that same end goal, in my opinion.
I mean, you can just get married and then you have a board of advisors.
Yeah, once you get married and just have someone tell you no.
Siblings, you got parents,
Yeah.
you got best friends. There's a whole board of advisors.
Oh, yeah.
that do everything you want.
And they are not shy.
I get advice every morning.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap up this episode.
Right.
Is there one thing that you want people to take away from this?
Yeah, no, ultimately, I think speaking to an accountant and a lawyer is very important at the outset of setting up a business. And also understanding what the roles of each of those professionals are. So I'll get questions that are accounting based. And I tell the client, like, hey, you should be going to an accountant for this question. And I know Zach gets the same question that some of the things that clients always do is they go to their accountant first for legal questions, which make no sense.
Oh, I definitely don't want to answer those questions.
All
No
the
way.
time. And so all I'm saying is understand the roles of these professionals and then tackle it from there.
Like we said at the outset, think about what your business is, how you're going to make money, and who you want around you, because that really does matter. So whether that's a board of advisors, whether that's someone you want to bring in on an equity basis, whatever that looks like. But make sure at the beginning you're setting those expectations. You know what you want your business to do.
I'm going to go ahead and say to hire me as your advisor because I'm going to protect you from the bills that you guys are going to give you at the end of those hours that you go talk to them. And thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.